If you're listening to this late at night, you've probably had a long day. Maybe you just closed your laptop after hours of work, or you've just checked your email one last time before bed, and now your mind is still spinning with thoughts about tomorrow. I understand that feeling. And I want to share with you something that has completely changed how I, and thousands of others, end those busy days and find truly peaceful sleep. This isn't some miracle cure or complicated method. It's something as simple and natural as sitting by a fireplace listening to a friend tell stories. This story began 3 years ago when I met Margaret, a marketing director in Chicago. She had everything that success brings: a high-level title, good salary, an office with a beautiful view of Lake Michigan. But there was one problem. She hadn't had a single good night's sleep in 6 months. "I've tried everything," she told me over coffee at a small cafe near her office. Meditation apps, sleep medication, even listening to Amazon rainforest sounds for 8 hours straight. But when my head hits the pillow, my brain still runs like a computer that can't be shut down. Maybe you know exactly the feeling Margaret was describing. That feeling when you're physically exhausted, but your mind is still bright as daylight, thinking about tomorrow's presentation, unanswered emails, or next week's important meeting. What I shared with Margaret that night wasn't a technique or method. It was a story. A story about a farmer in Iowa who learned something profound about releasing the day's pressures in the quiet of night. And you know what? That night, for the first time in months, Margaret slept 8 hours straight. That wasn't a coincidence. There's something about how stories work with our minds. We humans have evolved to learn and heal through stories for thousands of years. From our ancestors' campfire nights to the bedtime stories our grandparents told us. Tonight, I want to bring you 7 carefully chosen stories, each carrying a lesson from ancient wisdom traditions, but told through the lens of modern American life. From bustling cities like New York and San Francisco to small towns in Kansas and Montana, these stories will take you across this country, meeting people who could be your neighbors, colleagues, or even yourself. Each character in these stories faces challenges you might recognize: work pressure, difficult decisions, complicated relationships, and those questions about life's meaning that we all face in quiet moments. But in each story, they find something: a deep understanding, a new perspective, a small shift in how they approach life. And the beautiful thing is, these insights aren't complicated or foreign. They're as simple and natural as breathing. These stories are designed to do one special thing: help your mind transition from work mode to rest mode, naturally and gently. No pressure, no complex rules. Simply listen and let the stories guide you to a peaceful place. Here's how I suggest you experience tonight. Find your most comfortable position, whether that's in bed with soft pillows or in your favorite armchair. Turn off your phone or switch it to silent. Keep the lighting soft or completely dark, whatever makes you feel most comfortable. And then, just listen. You don't need to remember every detail or analyze every lesson. Let these stories wash away the day's tension like warm water and naturally guide you to a state of deep rest. If you find these stories meaningful, I'd be delighted if you share them with someone who might also need a good night's sleep. And if you'd like to receive stories like these more regularly, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories each week. Now, let me begin with the first story. This is the story of David, a software engineer in Portland, who discovered that sometimes the answers to our most complex problems are found in the simplest moments. It was a Monday morning in autumn, when the maple leaves were just beginning to turn orange and gold, and David was facing a decision that could change his entire career. Our first story tonight takes us to Portland, Oregon, where a profound lesson about true productivity awaits. This is the story of the executive's productivity reset, about discovering that sometimes the most effective way to do more is learning how to do less, but with complete presence. In this story, you'll meet David, a software engineer facing a decision that could change his entire career. Through an unexpected encounter with a street musician, he'll discover the difference between motion and meaningful progress, a principle from ancient wisdom traditions that can completely transform how we approach work and life. If you've ever felt like you're running on a treadmill that never stops, or wondered why success can sometimes feel empty, David's story will offer you an entirely new perspective. David Chen stood by the window of his 15th floor office, looking down at Portland as the city awakened in the dim light of a Monday autumn morning. The maple leaves on Burnside Street had begun turning orange and gold, creating a beautiful carpet beneath the high-rise buildings. But David couldn't appreciate that beauty. In his hand was his phone with an email he'd read 3 times in the past 20 minutes. As Chief Technology Officer of a rapidly growing fintech company, David was used to difficult decisions. But this email was different. It was an offer from Google, a senior director position with double his current salary, the opportunity to work on projects that could change the entire industry. David was the son of immigrants from Taiwan, raised in a family where success was measured by stability and constant progress. His parents worked 2 shifts to put him through college, and now, at 34, he had become one of the most respected engineers in the Pacific Northwest. But success came with its price. For the past 3 years, David had been working an average of 70 hours a week. He woke up at 5:30 a.m. to check server logs from the night before, worked until 8-9 p.m., and frequently received emergency calls on weekends. His relationship with girlfriend Sarah had ended 6 months ago because she felt like she was dating his laptop more than him. He looked back at his small but cozy office. Whiteboards filled with mathematical formulas, a workspace with 3 computer monitors, and a photo taken with his team after they successfully launched their first application. This was where he had spent 3 years of his life building from zero. Today was the day he had to present quarterly results to the board of directors. Excellent numbers, 340% user growth, 280% revenue increase, and the highest customer retention in the industry. On paper, everything was perfect. But inside, David felt like a machine running at excessive speed, about to break down. The conference room was already full of board members when David entered. The presentation went smoothly, green charts everywhere, applause from investors, and compliments about his exceptional leadership. But when the CEO stood up and announced that the company had just received $50 million in Series B funding, David felt something strange. Instead of excitement, he felt a heaviness in his chest. "This means we'll have to scale the team threefold in the coming year," the CEO continued, "and David will lead this entire technical expansion." Everyone in the room looked at David with expectation and admiration. This was exactly the moment he had worked tirelessly for 3 years. But why did he feel like he was drowning? After the meeting, David returned to his office and reopened the email from Google. The deadline to reply was tomorrow. His phone rang, a notification from the team about the production server experiencing unusual traffic patterns. David reflexively opened his laptop and began debugging. This was something he had done thousands of times: receive problem, analyze data, find solution, implement fix. But as his fingers flew across the keyboard, David suddenly realized something. He was solving this problem like a robot. There was no curiosity, no excitement about the technical challenge, just a desire to tick off another item on an endless to-do list. At 6 p.m., after resolving the server issue, David decided to walk home instead of driving as usual. Portland's autumn air was cool and fresh, completely different from the recirculated air in the office. He passed through Pioneer Courthouse Square, where several street musicians were performing for passers-by. An older musician, perhaps around 60, was playing acoustic guitar and singing a folk song David didn't recognize. There was something about the way he played music, peaceful, unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world. David stopped to listen, and for the first time in months, he was truly present in the moment. The song ended, and the musician looked up, smiling at David. "Rough day at the office?" he asked, his voice gentle and understanding. David surprisingly found himself nodding. "You could say that. Do you play music here regularly?" "Every day for the past 15 years, he replied. "My name is Robert. And you look like you're carrying the weight of the whole world on your shoulders." There was something about Robert's presence that made David feel safe to share. I have a job opportunity that could change everything, David heard himself saying. But I also have responsibilities at my current company. And honestly, I don't know what matters to me anymore. Robert nodded thoughtfully, his fingers still gently plucking the guitar strings. You know, son, I used to be a corporate lawyer for a big firm downtown. Worked 80-hour weeks, made partner at 35, had everything society said I should want. David was surprised. What happened? Complete burnout. I collapsed right in the middle of a deposition. The doctor told me that if I didn't change my lifestyle immediately, I'd have a heart attack before 45. Robert paused, looking up at the autumn sky. That's when I realized I had been confusing motion with progress. Motion with progress? I was constantly busy, constantly achieving, constantly moving toward the next goal. But I never paused to ask, is this what I really want? Or am I just running because I'm afraid to stop? David felt these words resonate deep in his chest. So what did you do? I learned to differentiate between what feels urgent and what's actually important, as well as the difference between holding on and letting go. Robert set his guitar aside. There's an old saying, the river that survives is the one that bends. Rigid trees break in storms, but bamboo survives because it's flexible. Tell me, Robert said gently, when you imagine yourself 10 years from now, what do you see? David was ready with the standard answer: CEO of a major tech company, financial independence, industry recognition. But when he actually visualized that future, something felt empty about it. Honestly, I see more of the same. Bigger office, more meetings, more pressure. And I realize I can't remember when I actually enjoyed coding anymore. Robert nodded with understanding. What if success isn't about reaching a destination, but about how you travel? What if productivity isn't about doing more, but about doing what matters most? There's a practice from ancient traditions, Robert continued. When facing big decisions, instead of making lists of pros and cons, you sit quietly and ask, what would love do? Not fear, not should, not others' expectations. Just love. What would love do? David repeated softly. Right. Love for yourself, love for the people around you, love for the work itself. Not attachment to outcomes, but genuine care for what you're creating in the world. Robert's wisdom that evening introduced David to several profound principles from ancient Buddhist teachings, though presented in accessible modern language. The first principle Robert shared was about anicca, impermanence, and the futility of attachment. When he spoke about motion versus progress, he was pointing to how we often cling to busyness and constant activity, mistaking movement for meaningful advancement. In Buddhist understanding, this attachment to constant doing creates suffering because it prevents us from being present with what actually is. The second teaching was about upadana, the nature of grasping and letting go. Robert's metaphor of rigid trees breaking while bamboo bends illustrates the Buddhist concept of non-attachment. This doesn't mean not caring, but rather holding our goals and achievements lightly, allowing for flexibility when circumstances change. The practice Robert introduced, "What would love do?" comes from metta-meditation principles, which emphasize loving kindness toward ourselves and others. This question helps distinguish between decisions driven by fear, ego, or external expectations versus those arising from genuine compassion and wisdom. Robert also embodied the principle of samasati, right mindfulness. His complete presence while playing music, his patient listening, and his unhurried way of being demonstrated how mindfulness transforms both the quality of our work and our relationships with others. The ancient saying about rivers that bend surviving reflects the middle way teaching, finding balance between extremes. Rather than choosing between ambition and surrender, David learned to find a sustainable path that honored both his professional goals and his personal well-being. Perhaps most importantly, Robert's entire presence illustrated santuti, contentment that comes from alignment rather than acquisition. His transition from high-powered lawyer to street musician wasn't about giving up success, but about redefining it according to inner values rather than external metrics. These teachings, developed over 2,500 years ago, address timeless human challenges. How do we find meaning in our work? How do we balance achievement with peace? How do we know when we're moving toward what truly matters versus just staying busy? David's transformation following his encounter with Robert demonstrates how ancient wisdom principles can create practical, measurable changes in modern professional life. Within 1 week of their conversation, David made his first significant change. He declined the Google offer, but not from a place of fear or obligation. Instead, he chose to stay because he realized his current role still held genuine meaning for him when approached differently. The conversation with his CEO proved surprisingly productive. When David honestly shared his burnout and need for sustainable growth strategies, they collaborated to restructure his responsibilities. They hired a senior engineer to share technical leadership, implemented systems to reduce David's on-call duties, and created policies that genuinely discouraged after-hours work. The results were remarkable. David's work week decreased from 70 to 45 hours, but his effectiveness actually increased. With more focused attention during work hours, code quality improved. Team morale rose because they had a leader who was present rather than perpetually stressed. Company growth accelerated because decisions were made thoughtfully rather than reactively. Beyond work metrics, David experienced personal restoration. He returned to playing piano, a hobby abandoned during college. He began dating again, meeting people through hiking groups and music venues rather than work functions. Every few weeks, he would visit Robert at Pioneer Square to share updates on his journey. Most significantly, David rediscovered joy in coding. Without pressure to constantly produce, he could again appreciate the elegance of well-written algorithms and the satisfaction of solving complex problems. Work became engaging rather than merely obligatory. 6 months later, David reflected on the key insight that changed everything. Productivity isn't about output volume. It's about alignment. When what you're doing matches who you are, work flows naturally instead of feeling forced. Tonight, as you settle into your own rest, let David's journey invite you into gentle reflection about your own relationship with productivity and presence. Take a moment to consider, in your daily life, can you recognize the difference between motion and meaningful progress? Are there areas where you might be staying busy to avoid asking deeper questions about what truly matters to you? Robert's question offers a powerful tool for decision-making. What would love do? Tomorrow, when you face choices, small or large, try asking this question. Not what fear suggests, not what you think you should do, not what others expect, but what genuine love and care for yourself and others would choose. Notice throughout your week, when are you most present in your work? What activities naturally engage your full attention versus those where you're simply going through the motions? This awareness can guide you toward the kind of alignment David discovered. Consider the bamboo wisdom. Where in your life might you benefit from more flexibility rather than rigid determination? What would it feel like to hold your goals lightly while still caring deeply about your work? As you drift towards sleep, carry with you this understanding. Sustainable success flows naturally when it aligns with who you are beneath all the doing. The peace you seek isn't waiting in some future achievement. It's available in this moment, in the gentle awareness that has been listening to this story all along. Let David's transformation remind you that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is pause long enough to remember what truly matters. And now, let us journey to small-town Vermont, where a teacher named Maria discovered that the most powerful lessons often come not from what we plan to teach, but from what we're willing to learn. Our second story tonight takes us to Boston, where a profound lesson about the power of focus awaits. This is the story of the Consultant's Focus Framework, about discovering that in a world of multitasking and constant deadlines, the ability to focus completely on one thing can make the difference between success and burnout. In this story, you'll meet Michael, a senior manager at a top management consulting firm who's struggling with the feeling that he's doing many things but nothing truly excellent. Through an unexpected encounter with a performance coach, he'll rediscover beginner's mind, a principle from Zen tradition that can transform how we approach work and life. If you've ever felt like you're juggling too many balls at once, or wondered why you can be busy all day yet feel like you've accomplished nothing, Michael's journey will offer insights that could change how you work forever. Michael Chang sat in his office on the 32nd floor of a high-rise in Boston's financial district, looking out at Boston Harbor through large glass windows. It was a Friday afternoon in late October, and the New England autumn light was gradually fading behind the skyscrapers. In front of him were 3 computer monitors, each displaying a different project, and beside them was a thick stack of documents for tomorrow morning's client meeting. As a senior manager at one of the world's most prestigious management consulting firms, Michael was used to high pressure and demands for perfection. At 32, he had 6 years of experience in the industry, had worked with Fortune 500 CEOs, designed strategies for billion-dollar deals, and was considered one of the company's rising stars. But lately, Michael felt like he was running on a treadmill that never stopped. Currently, he was simultaneously managing 3 major projects: a strategic review for an investment bank, a cost optimization project for a retail company, and a digital transformation initiative for a manufacturer. Each client believed their project was the top priority, and Michael found himself constantly switching context between spreadsheets, PowerPoint slides, and client calls. Michael grew up in San Francisco, in a Taiwanese family, where academic excellence and hard work were considered keys to success. His parents, an engineer and a pharmacist, had sacrificed much so he could get his MBA at Wharton and have the opportunity to work at one of the most prestigious consulting firms. The irony was that Michael had always been exceptionally good at focusing. In college, he could study in the library for hours without distraction. In business school, he was known for his ability to dive deep into case studies and emerge with insights that others had missed. But in the current consulting environment, deep focus seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford. Michael's typical day started at 6 a.m. checking emails from clients in different time zones. By 8 a.m., he was at the office, switching between morning calls with bank clients, afternoon meetings with retail teams, and evening deadlines for manufacturing presentations. Lunch was often a protein bar eaten while reviewing financial models. By evening, he was exhausted but without a feeling of accomplishment, just anxiety about things undone and approaching deadlines. His relationship with girlfriend Sarah had become strained. "Even when we go to dinner," she said last week, "I can see you thinking about work. You're physically present but mentally somewhere else." The worst part was that the quality of his work was suffering. Michael knew he was capable of producing brilliant analysis when he had time to focus properly. But with constant context switching, he found himself producing work that was good enough, rather than exceptional. Clients were still satisfied, but Michael knew he wasn't performing at his potential. Today's crisis started when the banking client called an emergency meeting about competitive analysis they needed by tomorrow morning. Simultaneously, the retail client messaged with urgent questions about cost structure, and the manufacturing client scheduled a last-minute call to discuss timeline changes. Michael felt like he was trying to solve 3 complex puzzles simultaneously, with none of them getting the full attention they deserved. At 7 p.m., Michael decided to stay late to finish the banking analysis. The office was nearly empty, with only fluorescent lights and the hum of air conditioning. He opened his laptop and began work on the competitive landscape for the banking client, but his phone was buzzing with messages from the retail team about cost questions. Michael tried to focus on the banking project, but his mind kept drifting to the retail presentation due next week and the manufacturing timeline he needed to review. Every few minutes, he checked his phone for emails, then struggled to refocus on the current task. What should have been 2 hours of focused analysis turned into 4 hours of fragmented, inefficient work. By 11 p.m., Michael finally finished a draft that he knew was below his usual standards. Exhausted and frustrated, he packed up his laptop and headed outside. Boston streets were quiet, with only occasional taxis and late-night workers heading home. As he walked toward the subway station, Michael noticed someone sitting on a bench outside Boston Common. An elderly Asian man, maybe early 60s, was quietly reading a book under a streetlight. Something about the peaceful quality of the man's presence made Michael slow down. "Long night at the office?" the man asked, looking up with a gentle smile. His voice had a slight accent, Japanese, maybe Korean. Michael nodded, surprised by the impulse to respond. "You could say that. Working late seems to be the norm these days." "I understand," the man said, closing his book carefully. "My name is Takeshi. I often come here to read when my mind is too active for sleep." "Michael," he replied, sitting down on the bench. "Are you from around here?" "I moved here 20 years ago from Kyoto. Work in the financial district. Well, worked. Recently retired." Takeshi paused, studying Michael's face. "You have the look of someone carrying too many thoughts at once." There was something about Takeshi's calm presence that invited openness. "I'm a management consultant. Supposed to help companies solve problems, but lately I feel like I can't solve my own. I'm working on 3 major projects simultaneously, and I can't give any of them the proper attention they deserve." Takeshi nodded thoughtfully. "In Japan, we have a saying, Ichigo Ichie, one time, one meeting. Each moment deserves complete presence. But the modern world makes this very difficult, doesn't it? Exactly. My clients expect immediate responses, my manager expects high-quality work, and I'm trying to juggle everything at once. But quality is suffering, and I'm constantly stressed. May I share something I learned during my career? Takeshi asked. I spent 30 years as a performance coach, working with Olympic athletes and professional musicians. What I discovered might surprise you. Michael leaned forward, intrigued. What's that? The greatest performers, those people who achieve extraordinary results, they don't actually multitask. They practice something we call single-pointed attention. Complete focus on one thing at a time. But that's impossible in consulting. I have multiple clients, multiple deadlines, multiple priorities all happening simultaneously. Takeshi smiled gently. That's what everyone thinks. But let me ask you, when you try to focus on 3 things at once, how much attention does each one actually receive? Michael thought about today's struggles. Honestly, maybe 30% each. And lots of energy wasted switching between them. Exactly. 3 problems receiving 30% attention each equals 90% effort for suboptimal results. But what if you gave 100% attention to one problem at a time? But how? The other problems don't disappear. They don't need to disappear. They need to wait patiently while you honor the current task with complete presence. Takeshi reopened his book. Michael could see it was about Zen meditation. This is a fundamental principle from Buddhism. When drinking tea, just drink tea. When walking, just walk. When solving a banking problem, just solve the banking problem. Sounds simple, but my brain doesn't work that way anymore. The moment I start focusing on one thing, my mind immediately jumps to the others. This is called monkey mind in Zen tradition. A mind that jumps from branch to branch, never resting. But the mind can be trained. Would you like to try a small experiment? Michael nodded, curious. For the next 5 minutes, focus completely on our conversation. Not on banking analysis, not on retail presentations, not on tomorrow's meetings. Just this conversation, this moment, this bench under the streetlight. When your mind wanders, and it will, gently return your attention here. They sat in silence for a moment. Michael tried to focus solely on the present moment, the feeling of the cool bench, the sound of distant traffic, Takeshi's calm presence. At first, His mind kept pulling toward work problems, but each time he noticed the wandering and gently returned his attention to the present. After 5 minutes, Takeshi asked, "How did that feel?" "Different," Michael said, surprised. "More peaceful, but also more alert. Like I was actually here, instead of thinking about being somewhere else." This is the power of focused attention. Now imagine bringing the same quality of presence to your work. Instead of scattered attention across 3 projects, what if you allocated specific time blocks for complete focus on each one? Time blocks? Tomorrow morning, for example, you could dedicate the first 2 hours exclusively to banking analysis. Phone on silent, emails closed, complete attention on that one project. Then transition mindfully to the retail project, giving it complete attention for a designated time. Michael felt skeptical. But what if the banking client calls with urgent questions during retail time block? Will the banking client be better served by immediate but scattered attention, or by delayed but complete attention? Most urgent requests can wait 2 hours for a thoughtful response. I never thought about it that way. This is where beginner's mind becomes powerful, Takeshi continued. In Zen, we call it Shoshin, approaching each task as if for the first time, with fresh eyes and open attention. Your expertise is valuable, but expertise can also create habits that limit effectiveness. What do you mean? You've developed a pattern of multitasking because it feels productive. But what if there's a more effective approach? Beginner's mind allows you to question assumptions and discover new ways. Michael thought about the morning's struggles. So, instead of trying to work on everything at once, I focus completely on one thing, then transition to the next with the same level of focus? Exactly. Quality of attention matters more than quantity of hours. 2 hours of focused work often produces better results than 6 hours of scattered attention. They talked for another 30 minutes. Takeshi shared stories about Olympic athletes who achieved breakthrough performance by eliminating distractions and focusing completely on their current routine. Musicians who discovered that practicing one piece mindfully was more effective than practicing multiple pieces frantically. The secret, Takeshi explained, is to treat each transition as a sacred pause. When finishing banking work and moving to the retail project, take 60 seconds to clear your mind, set intention for the new focus, and begin fresh. Like resetting a computer between programs? Beautiful analogy. Yes, exactly like that. When Michael finally stood to leave, Takeshi handed him a small card with a phone number. If you try this approach and want to discuss the results, call me. advice, just a listening ear. Walking to the subway, Michael felt something had fundamentally shifted. Not a dramatic transformation, but a subtle sense that there might be a different way to approach work. A way that honored both professional responsibilities and personal well-being. That night, for the first time in months, Michael didn't check emails before bed. Instead, he spent 15 minutes practicing focused attention, just sitting quietly and returning awareness to the present moment whenever his mind wandered toward work. Next morning, Michael arrived at the office with a specific plan. First 90 minutes completely dedicated to banking analysis, phone on silent, email closed, office door shut. The difference was remarkable. Without constant interruptions and mental fragmentation, he found himself thinking more clearly, making connections he had missed the day before, and producing analysis that was significantly more insightful. When the banking time block ended, Michael took Takeshi's advice about the sacred pause. 60 seconds to breathe, set aside banking thoughts, and prepare his mind for the retail project. Then complete focus on retail cost analysis for the next 90 minutes. By lunchtime, Michael had accomplished more high-quality work than the previous entire day. Most surprising was that focused work felt energizing rather than draining. Instead of constant low-level stress from juggling multiple priorities, there was satisfaction from deep engagement with each task. Takeshi's wisdom that evening introduced Michael to several fundamental principles from Zen Buddhism that directly address modern workplace challenges. The core teaching was Shoshin, beginner's mind. This principle encourages approaching each task with fresh awareness, free from preconceptions about how things should be done. Michael had become trapped in the assumption that multitasking was necessary for productivity, but beginner's mind opened him to questioning this belief and discovering more effective approaches. The practice of single-pointed attention comes from samadhi, the Buddhist principle of concentrated focus. This isn't about rigid control, but rather about gently returning attention to the chosen object of focus whenever the mind wanders. Like strengthening a muscle, this capacity improves with practice and becomes more natural over time. Takeshi's phrase, Ichigo Ichi, represents the Zen understanding that each moment is unique and unrepeatable, deserving complete presence. This principle transforms how we relate to routine tasks. Instead of rushing through them to get to something more important, we recognize each activity as worthy of full attention. The concept of sacred pauses between activities reflects the Buddhist understanding of transitions as opportunities for mindfulness. Rather than rushing frantically from task to task, these brief moments of intentional presence help clear the mind and prepare for full engagement with the next activity. The monkey mind analogy comes from Buddhist psychology's understanding of citta-vikshepa, mental restlessness and scattered attention. Buddhism recognizes this as a natural tendency of the untrained mind, but also teaches that through patient practice, we can develop stability and focus. These teachings address a fundamental misunderstanding in modern culture, the belief that doing more is always better. Buddhist wisdom suggests that doing less, but with complete presence and skillful attention, often produces superior results while maintaining inner peace and clarity. Michael's implementation of focused attention principles created measurable improvements in both work quality and personal well-being within just 2 weeks. His new approach involved structuring each day around focused time blocks. Morning hours, when mental energy was highest, were dedicated to the most complex analytical work. He allocated 90-minute blocks for each major project, with 15-minute sacred pauses between transitions. During these pauses, he would close his eyes, take several deep breaths, and consciously set aside the previous task before beginning the next. The results were remarkable. The banking analysis he had struggled with for days was completed in one focused morning session and received enthusiastic client feedback. "This is exactly the strategic thinking we were looking for," the banking CEO commented. "The depth of analysis is exceptional." Client relationships actually improved despite Michael being less immediately responsive to emails and calls. By responding to communications during designated time blocks rather than constantly throughout the day, his responses were more thoughtful and comprehensive. Clients began commenting that Michael seemed more present and engaged during meetings. Team dynamics shifted positively as well. Junior consultants noticed that when Michael was working with them, he was fully present rather than partially distracted by other projects. His coaching and mentoring became more effective, and team members reported feeling more supported and valued. Personal life transformation was equally significant. Sarah noticed the change immediately. "You seem like yourself again," she told him after their first uninterrupted dinner in months. "When you're here, you're actually here." 6 months after meeting Takeshi, Michael was promoted to principal, the youngest person in the firm's history to reach that level. The promotion committee specifically cited his exceptional focus and strategic thinking as key factors. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, let Michael's journey invite you to consider your own relationship with attention and focus. Take a moment to reflect. In your daily work, how often do you give complete attention to one task at a time? Notice throughout tomorrow, are there moments when you're physically engaged in one activity while mentally pulled toward others? Consider experimenting with Michael's approach. What would happen if you dedicated specific time blocks to individual tasks, treating each transition as a sacred pause? Even starting with 30-minute focused blocks can reveal the power of undivided attention. Takeshi's question offers practical guidance. Will your clients or colleagues be better served by immediate but scattered attention, or by delayed but complete attention? Most situations we label as urgent can actually wait for a thoughtful, focused response. As you settle into sleep tonight, practice the single-pointed attention that Michael learned. When thoughts about tomorrow's tasks arise, gently return your awareness to the simple experience of resting. Notice how this quality of presence brings natural calm and clarity. Let this story remind you that excellence comes not from doing everything at once, but from bringing complete presence to whatever you're doing. The focused mind is both more effective and more peaceful, a gift you can give yourself with each conscious moment of attention. And now, let us travel to the mountains of Colorado, where a small business owner discovered that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the gentlest touch. Our third story tonight takes us to the mountains of Colorado, where a profound lesson about sustainable growth awaits. This is the story of the founder's sustainable scaling, about discovering that sometimes the strongest foundation is built not through speed, but through patience, and that true success comes from growing roots as deep as the heights you wish to reach. In this story, you'll meet Elena, a tech entrepreneur whose startup's rapid success is threatening to destroy everything she's worked to build. Through an unexpected encounter with a master craftsman in the Colorado Rockies, she'll learn about the middle way, an ancient principle that teaches us how to find balance between ambition and sustainability, between growth and wisdom. If you've ever felt caught between the pressure to scale quickly and the desire to maintain quality, or wondered how to grow without losing your soul in the process, Elena's journey will offer insights that could transform how you approach both business and life. Elena Rodriguez stood on the deck of her rented cabin in Aspen, watching the first snow of October dust the peaks of the Maroon Bells. It was 6 a.m. on a Saturday, and she should have been enjoying the mountain silence, but her phone buzzed constantly with messages from her team back in Austin. Her startup, EcoFlow, a platform connecting sustainable businesses with conscious consumers, had grown from 3 people in her garage to 85 employees in just 18 months. At 29, Elena had achieved what many entrepreneurs only dream of. Featured on the cover of Fast Company, invited to speak at major tech conferences, and with $15 million in Series A funding burning a hole in her company's bank account. The board was pushing for aggressive expansion, new markets, new features, new hires. Strike while the iron is hot, her lead investor kept saying. Scale or fail. Elena's journey to this moment had been unconventional. The daughter of Mexican immigrants who ran a small organic farm outside Austin, she'd grown up understanding the rhythms of sustainable growth. Her parents taught her that forcing plants to grow too quickly produces weak roots and poor harvests. But the tech world operated on different principles. Move fast, break things, grow at any cost. The irony wasn't lost on her that a company built on sustainability principles was being pushed toward unsustainable growth. In the past 6 months, they doubled their team size, launched in 3 new markets simultaneously, and taken on feature requests from every major client. Revenue was up 400%, but so was employee turnover. Customer complaints were increasing. The elegant simplicity that had made EcoFlow special was getting lost in the complexity of rapid scaling. Elena had come to Aspen for a strategic retreat, really an escape from the pressure cooker her life had become. But even here, surrounded by natural beauty, she couldn't quiet the anxiety about decisions that needed to be made. The board wanted an expansion plan by Monday. Employees were burning out. Key team members were starting to question the company's direction. Her phone showed 47 unread messages from the weekend. A major client threatening to leave because of a bug in the new feature they'd rushed to market. Her CTO warning that their infrastructure couldn't handle the planned expansion. Her head of marketing reporting that their latest campaign had confused rather than attracted customers because they'd tried to communicate too many new offerings at once. Elena walked down from the cabin toward Aspen's main street, hoping the mountain air would clear her head. The town was quiet in the early morning, with only a few joggers and dog walkers out. She passed a small workshop with a hand-carved wooden sign, Mountain Craftworks, handmade furniture. Through the window, she could see an older man working at a woodworking bench, completely absorbed in shaping a piece of wood. Something about his focused, unhurried movements made her stop. She watched as he carefully measured, cut, sanded, and checked his work repeatedly. No rushing, no cutting corners, just patient attention to each step of the process. The man looked up and noticed her watching. He set down his tools and came to the door. "Beautiful morning," he said, wiping his hands on a worn apron. "You're up early for a tourist." "I'm not really a tourist," Elena replied. "More like a refugee from my own life." The man laughed warmly. "I'm James. Been making furniture here for 30 years. And you look like someone with the weight of big decisions on your shoulders." Elena found herself nodding. Elena. And yes, you could say that. I run a tech company, and everyone wants us to grow faster than we can handle. "Ah," James said, understanding immediately. The curse of success. Want to see something interesting? He led her into his workshop, which smelled of cedar and contained works in various stages of completion. "See this dining table?" He pointed to a beautiful piece that looked nearly finished. "Started it 8 months ago. Could have rushed it, used shortcuts, gotten it done in 6 weeks. But it wouldn't last. The joints would loosen, the wood would warp, the finish would fade." Elena ran her hand over the smooth surface. "So you take 8 months?" "I take however long the wood tells me it needs. Some pieces are ready in 3 months, others take a year. The key is listening to what wants to emerge, not forcing what you think should happen. But don't you have deadlines? Client pressure? Financial obligations? James smiled. Of course. But I learned something years ago when I was trying to scale this business. I thought success meant making more pieces faster, hiring more people, opening more locations. Nearly killed the thing I loved most. Elena's attention sharpened. What happened? I expanded too fast. Hired craftsmen who didn't share my standards. Started using cheaper materials to meet price points. Opened a second location before I understood how to maintain quality at distance. Within 2 years, I was producing furniture that looked like mine but had none of its soul. How did you recover? I didn't initially. Lost most of my clients, had to lay off good people, nearly went bankrupt. That's when I met an old furniture maker from Japan who taught me about sustainable craftsmanship. He showed me that true mastery comes from depth, not breadth. From patience, not speed. James picked up a piece of wood, running his fingers along its grain. He taught me about Kaizen, continuous improvement in small steps, and about mono no aware, the beauty of impermanence, and the importance of respecting natural rhythms. Most importantly, he taught me that sustainable success requires building foundations strong enough to support whatever you want to create. That sounds like what my parents always said about farming, Elena said. But the business world doesn't seem to operate that way. The business world is confused about the difference between growth and scaling, James replied. Growth can be forced, but scaling requires systems, culture, and wisdom. You can't scale what you don't understand. Elena thought about EcoFlow's recent challenges. We've been trying to scale everything at once: team, features, markets, revenue. But we're losing what made us special in the first place. What made you special? Simplicity. Authentic connections between businesses and consumers. A platform that actually helped people make sustainable choices instead of overwhelming them with options. James nodded. And now? Now we're becoming everything we originally stood against. Complicated, overwhelming, focused more on growth metrics than actual impact. The Japanese master taught me a principle called ikigai, finding the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be sustainably rewarded for. When you operate from that center, scaling becomes natural rather than forced. Elena felt something click into place. So, instead of asking, "How fast can we grow?" we should ask, "How can we grow in alignment with our purpose?" Exactly. What if your next board meeting focused not on expansion plans, but on deepening what you already do well? What if instead of adding new features, you perfected existing ones? What if instead of entering new markets, you became indispensable in your current ones? They talked for 2 hours. James shared stories of other local businesses that had found sustainable success by focusing on depth rather than breadth. A restaurant that had refused franchise opportunities to maintain quality. A ski instructor who limited his classes to provide exceptional experiences. A bookstore that had thrived by becoming deeply embedded in the community rather than competing with online giants. The principle behind all these stories, James explained, is what Buddhism calls the middle way, finding balance between extremes. Not the extreme of no growth, but also not the extreme of growth at any cost. The path of sustainable development. How do I convince my board that slower growth might actually be better? You don't convince them with arguments. You show them with results. What if you proposed a pilot program? Pick one area where you slow down and focus deeply. Measure not just revenue, but customer satisfaction, employee retention, product quality, long-term sustainability. James walked over to a finished piece, a simple but elegant chair. This chair took me 3 months to make. I could make 10 chairs in that time using different methods. But this one chair will last 50 years and become more beautiful with age. Those 10 quick chairs would need replacing in 5 years. So the question is whether you want to build a company that lasts 5 years or 50 years. Exactly. And the irony is that companies built for 50 years often become much more valuable in 5 years than companies built for quick exits. Elena spent the rest of the weekend hiking in the mountains, thinking about James's words. She noticed how the aspen trees grew, not in isolation, but as interconnected groves sharing root systems. Their sustainable growth came from mutual support and deep foundations, not from racing toward the sky. By Sunday evening, she had clarity. Instead of the aggressive expansion plan the board expected, she would propose what she called sustainable scaling, an approach that prioritized deepening their impact in existing markets before expanding to new ones. Back in Austin, Elena called an all-hands meeting. She shared James's wisdom about the difference between growth and scaling, and introduced the concept of ikigai as their guide for decision-making. Instead of trying to be everything to everyone, they would focus on being indispensable to their core users. The response was immediately positive. Employees who had been burning out expressed relief at the prospect of slowing down to do better work. Key team members who had been considering leaving decided to stay. Even some board members, initially skeptical, were intrigued by the pilot program approach. Over the next 6 months, EcoFlow implemented sustainable scaling practices. They paused new feature development to perfect existing ones. They chose depth over breadth in their market approach. They hired for cultural fit and long-term potential rather than immediate needs. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Customer satisfaction scores increased by 60%. Employee retention improved dramatically. The simplified, perfected platform actually attracted more high-quality users than the complex version had. Most surprisingly, revenue growth stabilized at a sustainable 20% per quarter instead of the unsustainable spikes and crashes they'd experienced before. A year later, when EcoFlow was approached by a major acquisition offer, Elena had the confidence to negotiate from strength rather than desperation. The acquiring company specifically cited EcoFlow's sustainable culture and high-quality platform as key factors in their decision. James's wisdom that weekend introduced Elena to several profound principles from Buddhist tradition that apply directly to modern business challenges. The core teaching was the middle way, Buddha's insight that extremes lead to suffering, whether in personal practice or professional endeavors. The middle way suggests finding balance between the extreme of stagnation and the extreme of reckless growth. This principle recognizes that sustainable progress requires neither forcing nor abandoning effort, but finding the optimal pace for long-term success. The concept of ikigai, though Japanese rather than strictly Buddhist, embodies Buddhist principles of right livelihood, earning a living through means that don't harm others and align with ethical values. When business decisions are made from this intersection of purpose, capability, market need, and sustainability, they naturally create conditions for lasting success. James's emphasis on listening to what wants to emerge reflects the Buddhist principle of Wu Wei, acting in accordance with natural flow rather than forcing outcomes. This doesn't mean passivity, but rather skillful action that works with circumstances rather than against them. The craftsman's approach to timing embodies the Buddhist understanding of patience and right timing. The Dharma teaches that forcing premature results often creates more suffering than allowing processes to unfold at their natural pace. This applies equally to personal development and business growth. The principle of Kaizen, continuous improvement in small steps, reflects the Buddhist path of gradual awakening through consistent practice, rather than seeking dramatic breakthroughs. This approach builds sustainable capacity for change rather than creating unsustainable bursts of effort. Most importantly, James's story illustrated how right understanding can transform our relationship to success itself. Instead of viewing business as a conquest to be won quickly, Buddhist principles suggest approaching commerce as a practice of mutual benefit and sustainable value creation. These teachings address a fundamental misunderstanding in modern business culture, the belief that faster is always better. Buddhist wisdom suggests that sustainable success comes from aligning actions with deeper principles rather than chasing external metrics alone. Elena's implementation of sustainable scaling principles created measurable improvements across all aspects of her business within 6 months. Her new approach involved what she called roots before branches, strengthening foundational systems before pursuing expansion opportunities. This meant investing in employee development, customer success, and product excellence before geographic or feature expansion. The company established Ikigai councils, small groups that evaluated all major decisions against the four-circle framework of purpose, capability, market need, and sustainability. This prevented the scattered focus that had plagued their rapid growth phase. Employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvement. Burnout decreased significantly when teams could focus deeply on fewer initiatives rather than juggling multiple priorities. Innovation actually increased when people had space to think deeply rather than react constantly. Customer relationships deepened as well. Instead of trying to serve everyone adequately, EcoFlow became indispensable to their core users. Net Promoter Scores increased, and organic growth through referrals became their primary acquisition channel. The financial results validated the sustainable approach. While quarterly growth rates became more predictable, annual growth actually increased. More importantly, the business became profitable and self-sustaining, rather than dependent on constant funding rounds. Elena herself experienced personal transformation alongside the business changes. She rediscovered her passion for the company's mission when she wasn't constantly firefighting growth problems. Her relationship with her family improved when she wasn't working 18-hour days. She began practicing meditation and found that clarity in her personal life translated to better business decisions. 2 years after meeting James, Elena was invited to speak at the same conferences where she'd once felt pressure to promise exponential growth. Now she advocated for sustainable scaling, sharing how depth had proven more valuable than breadth, and how patience had accelerated their ultimate success. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, let Elena's journey invite you to consider your own relationship with growth and sustainability. Take a moment to reflect. In your work or personal projects, are you trying to force growth that isn't sustainable? Are there areas where slowing down might actually help you move forward more effectively? Consider James's question about building something that lasts 5 years versus 50 years. What would change in your approach if you optimized for long-term sustainability rather than short-term metrics? Think about your own ikigai, the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what can sustainably support you. How might decisions change if you use this framework as your guide? Elena learned that sustainable success feels fundamentally different from forced growth. Instead of constant anxiety about maintaining unsustainable momentum, there's confidence that comes from building on solid foundations. Instead of burning out yourself and others, there's energy that comes from alignment with natural rhythms. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider the wisdom of the mountains Elena encountered, how growth happens slowly but surely, with deep roots supporting magnificent heights. Let her story remind you that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause long enough to ensure you're building something that will last. The middle way teaches us that sustainability and success aren't opposites. They're partners in creating something truly meaningful and enduring. And now, let us journey to the plains of Nebraska, where a family farmer discovered that the strongest crops grow not from fighting the weather, but from learning to dance with it. Our fourth story tonight takes us to the vast plains of Nebraska, where a profound lesson about true leadership awaits. This is the story of the manager's leadership evolution, about discovering that the strongest leaders are not those who control every variable, but those who learn to guide with patience and adapt with wisdom, like farmers who work with the seasons rather than against them. In this story, you'll meet Thomas, an operations manager at a large agricultural cooperative who believes that good leadership means having an answer for everything and a plan for every contingency. Through an unexpected crisis and the wisdom of an experienced farmer, he'll learn about patient leadership, an ancient principle that teaches us the difference between control and guidance, between forcing outcomes and cultivating conditions for success. If you've ever felt the weight of responsibility for others' performance, or struggled with the feeling that you must have all the answers, Thomas's journey will offer insights that could transform how you approach leadership and life. Thomas Mitchell stood in the main office of Heartland Agricultural Cooperative, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as dark clouds gathered over the Nebraska cornfields stretching to the horizon. It was late May, and what should have been the beginning of a promising growing season was turning into a weather nightmare. The forecast showed another week of heavy rain, following 2 weeks of flooding that had already delayed planting across half their region. At 38, Thomas had worked his way up from field operations to regional operations manager, overseeing agricultural services for over 200 family farms across 3 counties. His military background, 8 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, had taught him to plan meticulously, execute efficiently, and maintain control over every variable possible. These skills had served him well in civilian leadership, earning him recognition as one of the cooperative's top managers. But this season was testing every assumption he'd held about leadership and control. The weather refused to cooperate with carefully laid plans. Equipment was behind schedule due to muddy field conditions. Farmers were calling daily with anxiety about delayed planting and potential crop losses. His team of agronomists, equipment specialists, and field coordinators was stretched thin, trying to support increasingly desperate clients. Thomas grew up on a small farm outside Grand Island, where his grandfather had taught him that successful farming required discipline, preparation, and hard work. Control what you can control and work harder on everything else, Grandpa Mitchell used to say. This philosophy had guided Thomas through military service and into his current role, where he prided himself on having contingency plans for contingency plans. His office walls displayed charts tracking every metric imaginable: soil moisture levels, equipment utilization rates, customer satisfaction scores, team productivity measures. Thomas believed that with enough data and careful planning, most problems could be anticipated and solved. His team respected his competence and dedication, but lately, some had begun describing his management style as intense and micromanaging. The current crisis had started 3 weeks ago when an unusual weather pattern brought unprecedented rainfall to the region. Thomas had immediately activated emergency protocols, reassigning teams, extending service hours, and implementing daily status meetings to track progress. He'd been working 16-hour days, personally reviewing every major decision and trying to coordinate solutions for problems that seemed to multiply faster than they could be solved. This morning brought new challenges. Equipment breakdowns were increasing due to muddy conditions. 3 key team members had called in sick, probably from exhaustion. Most concerning, yesterday's farmer advisory meeting had turned contentious when several longtime clients expressed frustration with the cooperative's response to the crisis. "We understand this is difficult weather," said Frank Harrison, who'd been farming the same land for 40 years. "But it feels like you folks are more focused on your procedures than on helping us adapt to what's actually happening out here." Thomas had defended their systematic approach, explaining the importance of maintaining protocols during crisis situations. But Frank's words had stuck with him. After the meeting, as he watched farmers leave with expressions of resignation rather than confidence, Thomas wondered if his leadership was helping or hindering their ability to navigate the unprecedented season. His phone buzzed with another urgent message, this time from his wife Sarah, reminding him that he'd missed their daughter's soccer game again. The demands of crisis management were consuming not just his work life but his family time. Sarah had been patient, but Thomas could see the strain in her eyes when he arrived home late each night, still mentally running through tomorrow's action items. Thomas decided to drive out to the Harrison farm to check on their situation personally. Frank Harrison had been one of the cooperative's founding members and was respected throughout the region for both his farming expertise and his level-headed approach to challenges. If Frank was concerned about their response, Thomas needed to understand why. The drive through the countryside revealed the full scope of the crisis. Fields that should have been green with emerging crops were instead pockmarked with standing water. Equipment sat idle in farmyards, waiting for conditions dry enough to allow field work. Thomas felt the weight of responsibility for all these farmers who depended on the cooperative services and expertise. He found Frank Harrison sitting on his porch, drinking coffee and watching the latest band of storms approaching from the west. Despite the challenging circumstances, Frank appeared remarkably calm, a stark contrast to the urgency Thomas felt about addressing every aspect of the crisis. "Thomas," Frank called out as he pulled into the driveway. "Good to see you out here. Coffee?" Thomas accepted the offer and joined Frank on the porch. "Frank, I wanted to follow up on yesterday's meeting. I know this season has been frustrating for everyone, and I want to make sure we're doing everything possible to support you and the other farmers." Frank nodded thoughtfully, studying the approaching clouds. "I appreciate that, Thomas. You and your team have been working hard, maybe too hard. Mind if I ask you something?" "Of course. How many seasons have you been through since you took over operations management?" "This is my 4th season in this role, 6th with the cooperative overall." "And how many seasons like this one?" Thomas considered the question. "This is definitely the most challenging weather pattern I've experienced." Frank smiled gently. "Thomas, I've been farming this land for 43 years. I've seen floods, droughts, hailstorms, early freezes, late springs, and combinations of weather that would make a meteorologist cry. And you know what I've learned?" "What's that?" "Fighting the weather is like arguing with the wind. It's exhausting, and you never win." The farmers who last are the ones who learn to dance with whatever nature brings. Thomas felt defensive. But surely planning and preparation matter. We can't just accept whatever happens without trying to manage the situation. "Planning matters tremendously," Frank agreed. "But there's a difference between planning and controlling. There's a difference between leading and driving." "I'm not sure I understand the distinction." Frank stood up and walked to the edge of the porch, gesturing toward his fields. "See that low spot where the water's standing? 3 years ago, I would have been out there with drainage equipment, trying to force that water to move where I wanted it to go. Spent a fortune on pumps and ditches, and still lost half the crop. What changed? I started listening to older farmers who'd learned to work with their land instead of against it. That low spot? It's telling me something about the natural drainage patterns. Instead of fighting the water, I redesigned my field layout to work with those patterns. Now when we get heavy rain, the water flows naturally to where I've planted crops that can handle wet conditions. Thomas absorbed this perspective. So instead of controlling the water, you're guiding it. Exactly. And the same principle applies to leading people during crisis. You can't control all the variables, but you can create conditions where your team and your clients can adapt and thrive. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the storm clouds build. Thomas felt something shifting in his understanding of the situation. Frank, can I ask how you've seen good farm leaders handle seasons like this? The best ones I've known had what I call patient urgency. They acted quickly when action was needed, but they didn't confuse motion with progress. They stayed calm in the center of the storm so their people could think clearly too. Patient urgency, Thomas repeated. That sounds almost contradictory. Does it? Think about a good farmer during harvest. When conditions are right, they work around the clock to bring in the crop. But when weather stops fieldwork, they use that time for equipment maintenance, planning, and rest. They're always ready to act, but they don't waste energy fighting what can't be fought. Frank continued, the farmers who struggle are usually the ones who try to force every situation to match their preferred timeline. They burn out their equipment, exhaust their families, and make expensive mistakes because they can't accept that some things happen on nature's schedule, not theirs. Thomas thought about his own leadership style during the current crisis. I think I've been trying to solve every problem immediately, instead of helping people adapt to unprecedented conditions. Probably so. And your team can sense that energy. When a leader is stressed about controlling everything, everyone else gets stressed too. But when a leader demonstrates confidence in the process and patience with the timeline, people can focus on doing their best work within current conditions. As they talked, Thomas shared more about the specific challenges his team was facing. Frank listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions or sharing similar situations from his decades of farming experience. You know what might help? Frank suggested. Instead of daily crisis meetings focused on problems that can't be immediately solved, what if you held weekly adaptation meetings? Focus on what's working, what people are learning, and how to adjust approaches based on current conditions, rather than trying to force previous plans to work. That makes sense. People need time to implement solutions, not just report on problems. Exactly. And another thing, have you been out in the fields with your team lately, or mostly managing from the office? Thomas realized he'd been spending most of his time coordinating from headquarters rather than working alongside his team in the field. Mostly from the office. I thought that was more efficient for crisis management. Efficient for information processing, maybe. But not for leadership. Your people need to see that you understand what they're dealing with out there. And you need to understand how your decisions feel when you're the one implementing them in muddy fields. The conversation continued as the afternoon storm passed through, bringing another inch of rain but also cooler temperatures and clearer skies. Thomas found himself feeling calmer than he had in weeks, not because the problems had changed, but because his perspective on them was shifting. Before leaving, Frank offered one final piece of wisdom. Thomas, there's an old saying that the best leaders are like rain. They nourish growth without forcing it. Your job isn't to control every outcome, but to create conditions where good people can do their best work, even when circumstances are challenging. Frank's wisdom that afternoon introduced Thomas to several profound principles from Buddhist tradition that apply directly to leadership challenges. The core teaching was about khanti, patience combined with perseverance. This principle recognizes that sustainable progress often requires accepting the timing of natural processes while maintaining steady effort toward positive outcomes. True patience isn't passive waiting, but active engagement with present conditions while allowing processes to unfold at their appropriate pace. Frank's metaphor of dancing with nature reflects the Buddhist concept of Wu Wei, acting in harmony with natural flow rather than forcing outcomes through excessive effort. This doesn't mean avoiding action, but rather choosing actions that work with circumstances rather than against them. The distinction between leading and driving embodies the Buddhist understanding of right action, actions motivated by wisdom and compassion rather than ego and control. Driving people creates resistance and exhaustion. Leading them creates alignment and sustainable effort. The concept of patient urgency reflects the middle way teaching, finding balance between the extremes of reckless haste and paralyzing hesitation. This principle suggests that appropriate action can be both immediate and measured, urgent and sustainable. Frank's emphasis on listening to the land parallels the Buddhist practice of mindful awareness, paying attention to actual conditions rather than being driven by mental projections about how things should be. This quality of attention allows leaders to respond skillfully to emerging situations rather than reacting from predetermined plans. The teaching about nourishing growth without forcing it reflects the Buddhist understanding of compassionate action, creating conditions for others' success rather than trying to control their performance. This approach builds capacity and resilience rather than dependence and burnout. Most importantly, Frank's entire approach demonstrated how wisdom traditions can inform modern leadership challenges without requiring abandonment of practical effectiveness. The principles enhanced rather than replaced good management practices. Thomas's implementation of patient leadership principles created measurable improvements in both team performance and crisis response within just 3 weeks. His new approach began with changing the daily crisis meetings to twice-weekly adaptation sessions focused on learning and adjustment rather than problem reporting. This reduced meeting fatigue while actually improving information flow and decision-making quality. Thomas started spending 2 days per week in the field with his team, working alongside agronomists and equipment specialists, rather than managing exclusively from the office. This hands-on approach improved his understanding of implementation challenges while demonstrating his commitment to shared problem-solving. The results were immediate and positive. Team stress levels decreased noticeably when people felt heard rather than managed. Innovation increased as field teams felt empowered to experiment with adaptive solutions rather than strictly following predetermined protocols. Customer relationships improved dramatically. Farmers appreciated the cooperative's more flexible, responsive approach to unprecedented conditions. Instead of trying to force normal procedures in abnormal circumstances, the team developed creative solutions tailored to specific situations. Most surprisingly, operational efficiency actually increased when Thomas stopped trying to control every variable. By focusing team energy on high-impact activities rather than trying to manage every detail, they accomplished more with less stress and better results. Thomas's personal life improved as well. By working with natural rhythms rather than fighting them, he found more sustainable ways to handle both crisis demands and family responsibilities. Sarah noticed the change immediately, not just in his schedule, but in his energy when he was home. The season that had started as a potential disaster became a story of successful adaptation. While crop yields were below average due to weather conditions, farmer satisfaction with cooperative services reached an all-time high. Team retention improved, and several employees mentioned that the crisis had actually strengthened their confidence in the organization's leadership. Thomas realized that the most important leadership skill wasn't having all the answers, but creating conditions where answers could emerge from the collective wisdom and creativity of the team. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, let Thomas's journey invite you to consider your own approach to leadership and responsibility. Take a moment to reflect. In your work or family life, are you trying to control outcomes that might be better guided than driven? Are there situations where patient leadership might be more effective than urgent management? Consider Frank's wisdom about the difference between planning and controlling. What would change in your approach if you focused on creating conditions for success rather than trying to control every variable? Think about the concept of patient urgency. How might you maintain appropriate responsiveness while avoiding the exhaustion that comes from trying to force every timeline? Where in your life might you benefit from learning to dance with circumstances rather than fighting them? Thomas discovered that sustainable leadership feels fundamentally different from crisis management. Instead of constant pressure to solve every problem immediately, there's confidence that comes from trusting processes and people. Instead of burning out from trying to control everything, there's energy that comes from working with natural rhythms and collective wisdom. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider the wisdom of the farmers Thomas learned from, how growth happens through patience and proper conditions, not force and control. Let his story remind you that sometimes the most powerful leadership comes from knowing when to act and when to allow, when to guide and when to trust. The patient leader, like rain, nourishes growth without forcing it, creating conditions where others can flourish, even in challenging seasons. And now, let us journey to a bustling hospital in Chicago, where a dedicated physician discovered that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from having all the answers, but from being fully present with the questions. Our fifth story tonight takes us to the financial district of Chicago, where a profound lesson about navigating uncertainty awaits. This is the story of The Advisor's Risk Wisdom, about discovering that true financial wisdom comes not from predicting the future, but from learning to make sound decisions in the face of inevitable uncertainty and finding peace, regardless of outcomes beyond our control. In this story, you'll meet Rachel, a financial advisor whose confidence in her ability to protect clients from market volatility is shattered by an unexpected crisis. Through an encounter with a seasoned trader who has learned to navigate decades of market storms, she'll discover the principle of equanimity, an ancient teaching about maintaining inner stability while the external world rises and falls like ocean waves. If you've ever felt the weight of making decisions with incomplete information or struggled with anxiety about outcomes beyond your control, Rachel's journey will offer insights that extend far beyond financial markets into every area where we must act wisely amid uncertainty. Rachel Chen sat in her corner office on the 28th floor of a glass tower in Chicago's Loop, watching Lake Michigan stretch toward the horizon like a steel-gray mirror. It was a Tuesday morning in March, and what should have been a routine day was turning into her worst professional nightmare. The markets had opened down 800 points, continuing a slide that had already erased millions in client portfolios over the past 2 weeks. At 34, Rachel had built a reputation as one of the most promising financial advisors at Midwest Wealth Management. Her client base had grown from 15 to over 200 in just 5 years, managing nearly $300 million in assets. She specialized in serving entrepreneurs and professionals who valued her systematic approach to risk management and her confident presentations about portfolio protection strategies. Rachel's success had been built on a carefully cultivated image of expertise and control. Her client presentations featured sophisticated risk models, historical backtesting data, and detailed explanations of hedging strategies designed to protect wealth in various market conditions. "We can't control the markets," she would tell prospective clients, "but we can control our response to them." The daughter of Taiwanese immigrants, who had built a successful accounting practice through careful planning and conservative decision-making, Rachel had inherited both an analytical mind and a deep belief that sufficient preparation could prevent most financial disasters. Her parents had taught her that success came from studying harder, planning more thoroughly, and always having contingency plans for contingency plans. But the current market crisis was testing every assumption she'd held about risk management and portfolio protection. The defensive strategies that were supposed to protect client portfolios during market downturns were failing spectacularly. Hedge funds were imploding, supposedly safe bonds were declining, and even diversified portfolios were experiencing losses that her models had suggested were virtually impossible. Rachel's phone had been ringing constantly for days. Clients who had trusted her assurances about portfolio protection were now watching their retirement accounts and business investments decline by percentages that threatened their financial security. Mrs. Patterson, a 67-year-old widow who had invested her late husband's life insurance proceeds, was particularly devastating to speak with. "You told me this was safe," she had said yesterday, her voice trembling. "I trusted you." The worst part wasn't just the financial losses, but the realization that Rachel had promoted a level of certainty about market outcomes that simply didn't exist. She had genuinely believed in her risk management systems, but the current crisis was revealing the limitations of any model when facing unprecedented market conditions. Her colleague Marcus, a trader with 15 years of experience, had tried to warn her about overconfidence in risk models. "The market has a way of humbling everyone eventually," he had said last year during a team meeting. "The key is learning how to navigate uncertainty rather than trying to eliminate it." Rachel had dismissed his perspective as overly cautious, preferring her systematic approach to his intuitive market feel. Now, as she watched her carefully constructed professional identity crumble along with her clients' portfolios, Rachel wondered if she had fundamentally misunderstood both markets and risk. Her stress was affecting everything: sleep, appetite, relationships. Her fiancé David had expressed concern about her constant anxiety and her tendency to check market futures at all hours of the night. Rachel decided she needed perspective from someone who had successfully navigated multiple market crises. She reached out to Eleanor Martinez, a 62-year-old portfolio manager who had been with the firm for over 25 years and was widely respected for her steady performance through various market cycles. Eleanor agreed to meet for coffee that afternoon at a quiet cafe near the office. When Rachel arrived, she found Eleanor sitting calmly by the window, reading a book about philosophy rather than checking market updates on her phone. "Thank you for meeting with me," Rachel said, settling into the chair across from Eleanor. "I'm really struggling with how to help my clients through this market situation." Eleanor looked up from her book with kind eyes that held a depth of experience Rachel was only beginning to appreciate. "Of course, dear. These are challenging times for everyone in our profession. How are you holding up personally? Honestly, I feel like everything I thought I knew about risk management was wrong. My clients trusted me to protect them, and I've failed them. Eleanor nodded with understanding. I remember feeling exactly the same way during my first major market crisis in 1987. I was convinced that my career was over and that I had no business giving financial advice. How did you get through it? I learned the difference between managing uncertainty and trying to eliminate it. Can I share something that changed my entire approach to this work? Rachel leaned forward, eager for any wisdom that might help her navigate the crisis. I met an old trader named Samuel who had been through the Great Depression, multiple recessions, and decades of market volatility. He taught me that the markets are like weather. You can prepare for storms, but you can't prevent them. The key is learning to sail skillfully, regardless of conditions. But surely we have some ability to predict and prepare for different scenarios. Absolutely. Preparation matters enormously. But Samuel taught me that true wisdom comes from accepting that no amount of preparation can eliminate uncertainty. The most dangerous thing in our business is the illusion of control. Eleanor paused to sip her coffee, then continued. He introduced me to a concept from Eastern philosophy called equanimity, the ability to maintain inner stability regardless of external circumstances. Not indifference or detachment, but a kind of clear-minded presence that allows you to respond wisely rather than react emotionally. How does that apply to financial advising? When you're not constantly fighting uncertainty, you can actually help clients navigate it more skillfully. Instead of promising outcomes you can't guarantee, you can teach them how to make good decisions regardless of what markets do. Rachel thought about her recent client conversations. I think I've been so focused on trying to predict and control outcomes that I haven't prepared clients for the emotional challenges of market volatility. Exactly. Samuel used to say that markets are 10% math and 90% psychology. The clients who do well long-term aren't necessarily those with the most sophisticated strategies, but those who can maintain perspective during both good times and bad. Can you give me an example of how this looks practically? Eleanor smiled. During the 2008 crisis, I had a client named Robert who was approaching retirement. His portfolio had declined significantly, and he was terrified about his financial future. Instead of promising that markets would recover quickly, or trying to convince him that my strategy would somehow protect him from further losses, I focused on helping him understand what he could and couldn't control. What did that look like? We reviewed his actual financial needs versus his fears about market losses. We discussed how his spending could be adjusted temporarily if needed. We talked about the historical patterns of market recovery without making promises about timing. Most importantly, we created a plan that could work across multiple scenarios rather than betting on one specific outcome. How did he respond? Initially, he was frustrated that I couldn't give him more certainty. But over time, he appreciated having a framework for decision-making that didn't depend on market predictions. When markets did recover, he was grateful that we hadn't made panic-driven changes to his long-term strategy. Rachel absorbed this perspective. So instead of trying to eliminate risk, you help clients understand and work with it. Precisely. And here's what I've learned about myself in this work. When I try to control outcomes, I become anxious and make worse decisions. When I focus on providing clear thinking and steady guidance, both my clients and I navigate uncertainty much more successfully. They talked for over an hour. Eleanor shared stories of various market cycles, explaining how her approach had evolved from trying to time markets perfectly to helping clients maintain rational, long-term perspectives, regardless of short-term volatility. Eleanor, how do you personally handle the stress of managing other people's money during times like this? I practice what Samuel taught me about accepting impermanence. Markets go up and down, portfolios rise and fall, even careers have their cycles. When I remember that all external conditions are temporary, I can stay focused on what actually matters, helping people make wise decisions with whatever information we have today. That sounds almost like meditation or spiritual practice. In many ways, it is. Samuel was deeply influenced by Buddhist philosophy, particularly teachings about non-attachment. Not that you stop caring about outcomes, but you stop being controlled by your need for specific results. As their conversation wound down, Eleanor offered practical guidance for Rachel's immediate situation. Focus on honest communication with your clients about what's happening and what you're learning. Don't promise quick solutions, but demonstrate steady thinking and genuine care for their well-being. Most clients appreciate honesty more than false confidence. And for myself, remember that this crisis is teaching you something essential about markets and about yourself. The advisors who last in this business are those who learn from every cycle rather than being defeated by them. Eleanor's wisdom that afternoon introduced Rachel to several profound principles from Buddhist tradition that apply directly to financial decision-making and risk management. The core teaching was about equanimity, maintaining mental stability amid changing external conditions. This principle recognizes that attachment to specific outcomes creates suffering, while acceptance of uncertainty allows for clearer thinking and more skillful action. In financial contexts, equanimity enables advisors to provide steady guidance regardless of market volatility. The concept of impermanence became central to Rachel's new understanding. Buddhist teaching emphasizes that all conditions, whether favorable or challenging, are temporary. Applied to markets, this perspective prevents both excessive optimism during bull markets and paralyzing pessimism during bear markets. Eleanor's mentor Samuel had taught her about non-attachment, caring deeply about clients while not being controlled by the need for specific investment outcomes. This principle allows financial professionals to focus on process rather than results, leading to more consistent decision-making over time. The Buddhist understanding of uncertainty as an inherent aspect of existence, rather than a problem to be solved, transformed Rachel's relationship to market unpredictability. Instead of viewing uncertainty as a professional failure, she began seeing it as the context within which wisdom and skill could be developed. The teaching about right livelihood suggests that ethical work involves acknowledging limitations honestly rather than making claims beyond one's actual knowledge or control. This principle guided Rachel toward more authentic client relationships based on shared navigation of uncertainty rather than promised protection from it. The concept of skillful means, adapting methods to serve others' genuine needs rather than one's own ego, helped Rachel shift from trying to impress clients with sophisticated predictions to actually helping them make better decisions within uncertain conditions. Most importantly, these teachings address the fundamental anxiety that drives much poor financial decision-making, the desire for certainty in an inherently uncertain world. Buddhist wisdom suggests that peace comes not from controlling outcomes but from developing the capacity to respond wisely, regardless of circumstances. Rachel's implementation of equanimity-based financial advising created significant improvements in both client relationships and investment outcomes within 6 months. Her new approach began with complete honesty about the limitations of market predictions and risk models. Instead of promoting strategies that promised to eliminate risk, she focused on helping clients build portfolios that could perform reasonably well across multiple scenarios. Client communications shifted from confident predictions to educational discussions about historical market patterns, decision-making frameworks, and emotional preparation for various outcomes. This approach initially surprised clients accustomed to more assertive market forecasts, but ultimately built deeper trust through demonstrated competence and honesty. Rachel developed what she called scenario planning sessions, where clients explored how they would respond to various market conditions, rather than trying to predict which conditions would occur. This preparation proved invaluable during subsequent market volatility when clients felt emotionally ready for temporary losses rather than shocked by them. Her own stress levels decreased dramatically when she stopped feeling responsible for market outcomes beyond her control. By focusing on providing excellent guidance and honest communication, she found both professional satisfaction and personal peace even during volatile periods. Client retention improved significantly, as people appreciated having an advisor who helped them understand reality rather than selling them comfortable illusions. Referrals increased as satisfied clients shared their positive experiences with Rachel's transparent, educational approach to financial planning. Most importantly, Rachel's investment decision-making improved when she stopped trying to time markets perfectly and instead focused on building robust, diversified strategies that could succeed across various economic conditions. Her analytical skills became more valuable when applied to scenario analysis rather than market prediction. 2 years after her crisis of confidence, Rachel was promoted to senior advisor and began training other financial professionals in what the firm called wisdom-based financial planning, an approach that acknowledged uncertainty while providing excellent guidance within that reality. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, let Rachel's journey invite you to consider your own relationship with uncertainty and control. Take a moment to reflect. In your work or personal life, are there areas where you're trying to eliminate uncertainty rather than learning to navigate it skillfully? What would change if you focused on responding wisely to current conditions rather than predicting future outcomes? Consider Eleanor's teaching about the difference between caring about results and being controlled by the need for specific results. How might this distinction apply to your own professional challenges or personal goals? Think about the concept of equanimity, maintaining inner stability while external conditions change. What would it feel like to approach tomorrow's uncertainties with steady presence rather than anxious control? Rachel discovered that accepting uncertainty actually increased her effectiveness rather than diminishing it. When she stopped fighting the inherent unpredictability of markets, she could help clients navigate that unpredictability with greater skill and confidence. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider the wisdom of the experienced traders Rachel learned from, how success comes not from controlling outcomes, but from responding skillfully to whatever emerges. Let a story remind you that sometimes the greatest strength comes from acknowledging what we cannot control while excelling at what we can. True wisdom lies not in eliminating uncertainty, but in developing the capacity to act with clarity and compassion regardless of external conditions. And now, let us journey to the creative districts of Austin, where an innovative designer discovered that breakthrough ideas come not from forcing inspiration, but from creating space for insight to naturally emerge. Our sixth story tonight takes us to the vibrant creative districts of Austin, Texas, where a profound lesson about innovation and inspiration awaits. This is the story of the innovator's creative breakthrough, about discovering that the most powerful ideas don't come from forcing inspiration through endless effort, but from creating spacious conditions where insight can naturally emerge, like flowers blooming in a well-tended garden. In this story, you'll meet Maya, a product designer whose reputation for breakthrough innovation is being challenged by a creative block that threatens both her career and her sense of identity. Through an unexpected encounter with a master potter in Austin's Arts District, she'll learn about the space between thoughts, an ancient principle that teaches us how creativity flows when we stop grasping for it and start allowing it. If you've ever felt stuck in creative work or struggled with the pressure to innovate on demand, Maya's journey will offer insights that could transform not just your professional creativity but your entire relationship with the mysterious process of inspiration itself. Maya Patel stood in her design studio in Austin's East Side, surrounded by whiteboards covered in sketches, prototypes scattered across tables, and mood boards that had evolved into chaotic collages of frustration. Through the large windows, she could see the Texas Hill Country rolling toward the horizon, bathed in the golden light of a late September afternoon. But the beautiful view couldn't lift the creative fog that had settled over her work for the past 3 months. At 31, Maya had built a reputation as one of Austin's most innovative product designers. Her studio, Emergence Design, had created award-winning work for tech startups, sustainable fashion brands, and social impact organizations. She specialized in finding elegant solutions to complex problems, with a portfolio that included everything from intuitive app interfaces to revolutionary packaging for eco-friendly products. Maya's success had been built on her ability to see connections others missed and to synthesize diverse influences into breakthrough concepts. Clients sought her out specifically for what they called her magic touch, the ability to take struggling projects and transform them into compelling, market-ready innovations. Design publications had featured her work, and she regularly spoke at conferences about creative process and sustainable design. But her current project was testing every assumption she'd held about creativity and innovation. NextGen Energy, a clean technology startup, had hired her to design the user experience for a revolutionary home energy management system. The technology was brilliant, but the interface needed to make complex energy data accessible and engaging for everyday consumers. After 3 months of intensive work, Maya felt further from a solution than when she'd started. The daughter of Indian immigrants who had built a successful engineering consulting firm through methodical problem-solving and persistent effort, Maya had inherited both analytical thinking and a strong work ethic. Her parents had taught her that any challenge could be overcome through sufficient research, planning, and determination. This approach had served her well throughout design school and her early career. But lately, the harder she worked on the NextGen project, the more elusive the solutions seemed to become. She had filled dozens of sketchbooks, created hundreds of wireframes, and tested countless prototypes. Her team had conducted extensive user research, analyzed competitor products, and explored every design pattern in their toolkit. Yet the breakthrough insight that would tie everything together remained frustratingly out of reach. The pressure was mounting from multiple directions. NextGen's CEO was growing impatient with the lack of progress, especially given Maya's reputation for quick breakthroughs. Her team was showing signs of burnout from the constant iteration and revision cycles. Most concerning to Maya, She was beginning to doubt her own creative abilities for the first time in her career. Her typical creative process had always involved immersing herself completely in a problem, gathering vast amounts of information, and then working intensively until the solution emerged. She thrived on deadline pressure and had often produced her best work during all-night design sessions fueled by coffee and determination. But this project seemed immune to her usual approach. Maya's stress was affecting everything beyond work. Her apartment had become an extension of her studio, with project materials spread across every surface. She hadn't seen friends in weeks, had missed her yoga classes, and was surviving on takeout food eaten while sketching. Her partner Alex had expressed concern about her obsessive work habits and suggested she might benefit from stepping back from the project temporarily. The morning's team meeting had been particularly difficult. Despite presenting 3 refined concepts, the client feedback was lukewarm at best. "These are all technically solid," the CEO had said, "but none of them feel breakthrough. Where's the innovation that made us want to work with you?" After the client left, Maya sat alone in her studio, staring at the walls of work that represented months of effort but seemed to lack the spark of genuine insight. For the first time in her career, she wondered if she had lost her creative edge. Perhaps innovation couldn't be forced through effort alone, but she didn't know any other approach. Needing to clear her head, Maya decided to walk through the South First District, where Austin's eclectic mix of galleries, studios, and artisan shops might provide some inspiration. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the colorful murals and converted warehouses that housed the city's creative community. As she wandered without particular direction, Maya found herself drawn to a pottery studio she'd never noticed before. Through the large windows, she could see an older man working at a potter's wheel, his hands gently shaping clay with movements that appeared effortless yet precise. Something about his calm focus created a sharp contrast to her own frenetic energy. The sign on the door read, "River Clay Studio, Functional Pottery." Maya hesitated, then decided to go inside. The studio was filled with natural light and beautiful ceramic pieces in various stages of completion. The air smelled of earth and water, and the atmosphere felt incredibly peaceful compared to her design studio's chaotic energy. The potter looked up from his wheel with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Welcome. I'm David. Feel free to look around. I'm Maya. I was just walking by and was drawn to watch you work. There's something so calming about it." David wiped his hands on a towel and stepped away from his wheel. Pottery has a way of slowing people down. Are you an artist yourself? Product designer, actually. Though lately I'm not feeling very creative. Maya found herself sharing more than she intended. I'm stuck on a project, and despite months of intensive work, I can't seem to find the solution. David nodded with understanding. I've been working with clay for 40 years, and I've learned that creativity has its own rhythms. Sometimes the harder we push, the more elusive inspiration becomes. But surely effort and persistence matter. I can't just wait around hoping for ideas to appear. Of course, effort matters. But there's a difference between productive effort and forced effort. Would you like to see what I mean? David led her to a shelf displaying various pottery pieces. See this bowl? He pointed to an elegant, simple piece with subtle asymmetries that somehow made it more beautiful. I tried to make this exact bowl probably 50 times over the course of 2 years. Every attempt was technically competent but lacking something essential. What changed? I stopped trying to make that specific bowl and started listening to what the clay wanted to become. The breakthrough came when I focused on the process rather than the outcome, on being present with the materials rather than controlling the result. Maya studied the bowl more closely. It's beautiful. But how do you apply that approach to commercial work with deadlines and client expectations? Great question. Let me show you something else. David walked to his current work area, where several pieces were in progress. I'm working on a commissioned dinner set for a restaurant. They have specific requirements for size, durability, and aesthetic. But within those constraints, I'm allowing each piece to emerge naturally, rather than forcing them to match a predetermined concept. Doesn't that make the process less efficient? Initially, yes. But the results are much more authentic and engaging. And, interestingly, when I work this way, I often discover solutions I never would have found through planned approaches. David continued, "There's an old saying from Zen Buddhism: the pine teaches silence, the rock teaches stillness, the lake teaches reflection." Sometimes our best insights come not from doing more, but from creating space for wisdom to emerge. Space for wisdom to emerge, Maya repeated thoughtfully. But in commercial design, clients expect rapid iteration and constant progress updates. I understand that pressure. But consider this: how much of your recent effort has actually moved you closer to a breakthrough versus keeping you busy? Sometimes what looks like progress is actually just elaborate procrastination from the real creative work. Maya felt this observation land deeply. You're right. I've been generating lots of output, but none of it feels truly innovative. It It's like I'm designing from memory rather than genuine insight. Exactly. And that's often what happens when we try to force creativity. We fall back on familiar patterns instead of discovering something new. They talked for another hour as David continued working at his wheel. Maya was fascinated by how he approached each piece with what he called beginner's mind, as if encountering clay for the first time, even after decades of experience. In Zen practice, David explained, there's a concept called don't know mind. It's about approaching situations with openness rather than preconceptions. When I sit down at the wheel, I try to empty my mind of ideas about what should happen and instead pay attention to what wants to happen. How would that apply to my design problem? What if instead of trying to solve the energy interface challenge, you spent time simply experiencing energy in your daily life? Not researching or analyzing, but directly noticing how energy feels, flows, and changes throughout your day. Maya considered this suggestion. So less thinking about the problem and more sensing into it? Precisely. Innovation often comes from noticing what everyone else overlooks. But you can't notice subtle things when your mind is filled with concepts and strategies. As the afternoon progressed, David invited Maya to try working with clay herself. Sometimes the hands know things the mind hasn't figured out yet, he suggested. At first, Maya approached the clay with her typical designer mindset, trying to create something specific and aesthetically pleasing. But David encouraged her to simply play with the material without any goal beyond exploration. Gradually, she found herself relaxing into the direct sensory experience of shaping clay. Notice how different this feels from your usual design process, David observed. You're not trying to solve anything or create anything particular. You're just exploring possibilities. Maya realized he was right. For the first time in months, she felt genuinely curious and playful, rather than pressured and anxious. It's like my mind has space to wander and notice things. That's the state where real innovation happens. Not when we're forcing solutions, but when we're open to discovering what's already trying to emerge. When Maya finally left the pottery studio that evening, she felt different. Not because she had found the solution to her design challenge, but because she had rediscovered what creativity actually felt like when it wasn't forced or pressured. David's wisdom that afternoon introduced Maya to several profound principles from Zen Buddhism that apply directly to creative work and innovation challenges. The core teaching was about don't know mind, or beginner's mind, approaching creative challenges with openness rather than preconceptions. This principle recognizes that expertise, while valuable, can sometimes limit perception by creating mental habits that prevent fresh insights from emerging. The concept of space between thoughts became central to Maya's new understanding of creativity. Buddhist teaching emphasizes that insights often arise in moments of mental spaciousness rather than during intense mental effort. This principle suggests that creating regular periods of non-doing can actually enhance productivity and innovation. David's approach to pottery embodied the principle of wu-wei, acting in accordance with natural flow rather than forcing outcomes through excessive effort. Applied to creative work, this means allowing projects to develop organically within appropriate constraints, rather than imposing predetermined solutions. The teaching about listening to materials reflects the Buddhist practice of mindful awareness, paying attention to present moment experience rather than being driven by mental projections about desired results. This quality of attention allows creative professionals to respond to subtle possibilities that emerge during the working process. The Zen understanding of emptiness as fertile space rather than mere absence transformed Maya's relationship to creative blocks. Instead of viewing periods without ideas as professional failures, she began seeing them as necessary fallow times that prepare conditions for insight. The principle of non-attachment to outcomes, caring deeply about quality while not being controlled by specific results, helped Maya distinguish between creative effort and creative forcing. This approach paradoxically increased both her creative effectiveness and her personal well-being. Most importantly, these teachings address the fundamental anxiety that often undermines creative work, the fear that inspiration won't come when needed. Buddhist wisdom suggests that creativity is always available when we create appropriate conditions for its emergence. Maya's implementation of spacious creativity principles created remarkable improvements in both her design process and project outcomes within just 6 weeks. Her new approach began with what she called creative Sabbaths, regular periods where she stepped completely away from active problem solving to engage in activities that nourished her broader awareness. These included nature walks, pottery sessions with David, cooking, and simply sitting quietly without agenda. She restructured her studio practice to include contemplative time at the beginning of each work session. Instead of immediately diving into tasks, she would spend 15 minutes simply being present with the project challenge without trying to solve anything. This practice often surfaced insights that had been obscured by habitual thinking patterns. Maya introduced exploration phases into her client work, periods dedicated to curiosity and play rather than solution finding. Initially, some clients were skeptical of this approach, but the quality of insights that emerged during these phases consistently exceeded expectations. The breakthrough on the next-gen project came during one of these exploration sessions. While spending time in her own home simply noticing energy use patterns without analyzing them, Maya discovered that people's relationship to energy was more emotional and intuitive than rational. This insight led to an interface design that made energy management feel like caring for a living system rather than managing technical data. Client response was enthusiastic. "This is exactly the kind of innovation we were hoping for," the CEO told her. "It's familiar enough to be intuitive, but novel enough to be engaging. How did you think of this approach?" Maya's personal well-being improved dramatically as she learned to work with creative rhythms rather than against them. Stress levels decreased when she stopped fighting periods of apparent non-productivity and started trusting the creative process. Paradoxically, her actual productivity increased as insights became more frequent and relevant. Her reputation grew as word spread about her contemplative design approach. Other creative professionals began seeking her mentorship in developing more sustainable and effective creative practices. Most significantly, Maya rediscovered joy in her work. When creativity became a practice of discovery rather than a performance of predetermined skills, each project became an adventure rather than a test. Tonight, as you prepare for rest, let Maya's journey invite you to consider your own relationship with creativity and effort. Take a moment to reflect. In your work or personal projects, are you trying to force inspiration through constant effort? What would happen if you created more space for insights to emerge naturally? Consider David's teaching about the difference between productive effort and forced effort. Where in your life might you be working harder rather than working with greater awareness and sensitivity? Think about the concept of don't know mind, approaching familiar challenges with fresh curiosity rather than habitual responses. What would change if you met tomorrow's creative challenges with beginner's mind? Maya discovered that stepping back from forced problem solving actually accelerated her creative breakthroughs. When she stopped grasping for solutions and started creating conditions for insight, inspiration became more reliable rather than more elusive. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider the wisdom of the potter Maya learned from, how the most beautiful creations emerge when we work with materials and circumstances rather than against them. Let her story remind you that creativity flows most freely when we provide spacious conditions rather than desperate pressure. True innovation comes not from forcing new ideas, but from creating space where fresh possibilities can naturally unfold. And now, for our final story, let us journey to a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Denver, where a working parent discovered that the secret to having it all isn't doing everything perfectly, but being fully present for whatever you're doing. Our final story tonight takes us to the quiet suburban neighborhoods outside Denver, where a profound lesson about true life integration awaits. This is the story of the executive parent's integration mastery, about discovering that the secret to having it all isn't doing everything perfectly or simultaneously, but learning to be completely present for whatever you're doing in each moment, bringing your whole self to each role rather than fragmenting across them all. In this story, you'll meet Amanda, a marketing executive and mother of two who believes that success means excelling equally in every area of life at the same time. Through an unexpected encounter with a mindful parenting coach at her daughter's school, she'll learn about presence-based living, an ancient principle that teaches us how to multiply our impact by dividing our attention mindfully rather than scattering it frantically. If you've ever felt torn between competing priorities or exhausted from trying to be everything to everyone while feeling like you're failing at it all, Amanda's journey will offer insights that could transform not just how you manage responsibilities, but how you experience the richness of a multifaceted life. Amanda Foster sat in her home office in a quiet Denver suburb, laptop balanced on her knees, trying to finish a presentation for tomorrow's board meeting, while simultaneously helping her 8-year-old daughter Emma with math homework and keeping one ear tuned to her 5-year-old son Jake's elaborate Lego construction project in the next room. It was 8:30 p.m. on a Thursday, and this scene had become her new normal, a constant juggling act that left her feeling like she was failing at everything despite working harder than ever. At 36, Amanda had achieved remarkable success as vice president of marketing at a growing tech company specializing in educational software. She led a team of 12, managed a $5 million annual budget, and had recently been featured in Forbes as one of 30 under 40 marketing leaders to watch. Her campaigns had won industry awards, and she was being considered for promotion to Chief Marketing Officer. But success in the corporate world had come with costs that were becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Since her divorce 2 years ago, Amanda had been solo parenting while maintaining her demanding career. The tech industry's always-on culture meant evening calls with international teams, weekend strategy sessions, and constant connectivity to manage crises and opportunities as they emerged. Amanda's days began at 5:30 a.m., checking emails before the kids woke up, continued through school drop-offs, full workdays punctuated by parent-teacher conferences squeezed into lunch breaks, and ended with homework supervision, dinner preparation, bedtime routines, and then more work late into the evening. Weekends were filled with kids' activities, household management, and catching up on projects that couldn't be completed during the week. The daughter of a successful attorney and a pediatrician, Amanda had grown up believing that anything worth doing was worth doing excellently. Her parents had modeled the possibility of having both demanding careers and a loving family, though Amanda was beginning to realize she hadn't fully understood the personal costs of their achievement until she was attempting something similar as a single parent. Her current crisis had been building for weeks. Emma's teacher had requested a conference about her declining academic performance and apparent anxiety. Jake had been having behavioral issues at preschool that the director attributed to inconsistent attention and routine at home. Amanda's own health was suffering. She couldn't remember the last time she'd exercised, eaten a meal without multitasking, or slept through the night without checking her phone. Most frustrating was the growing sense that despite her best efforts, she wasn't excelling at anything. Work projects that should have showcased her strategic thinking were becoming rushed efforts to meet deadlines. Parent-teacher interactions felt superficial and hurried. Quality time with her children was constantly interrupted by urgent emails or calls that couldn't wait. The previous week had been particularly challenging. A major client had demanded last-minute changes to a campaign launch, requiring Amanda to work through Jake's birthday party, participating via speakerphone while trying to help him blow out candles. Emma had mentioned that she felt sad because Mommy's always thinking about work even when she's here. The comment had hit Amanda like a physical blow, highlighting her growing awareness that her children were getting only partial versions of her attention. Her well-meaning friends offered various solutions: better time management systems, more efficient childcare arrangements, meal delivery services, and scheduling apps. But Amanda was beginning to suspect that the problem wasn't logistical efficiency, but something deeper about how she was approaching the integration of her different roles and responsibilities. Friday afternoon brought another crisis that crystallized her growing awareness that her current approach wasn't sustainable. Emma's school called during Amanda's presentation to the executive team. Her daughter was in the nurse's office with a stomachache that seemed stress-related. Amanda had to excuse herself from the meeting, pick up Emma, and then attempt to finish her presentation via conference call while Emma rested on the couch beside her. That evening, as Amanda tucked Emma into bed, her daughter asked a question that stopped her cold. "Mom, do you ever just think about me when you're with me? Like not about work or Jake or anything else, just me?" Amanda's heart broke as she realized her 8-year-old had accurately identified the core issue, the quality of presence she was bringing to each interaction. She was physically present for many moments, but mentally distributed across dozens of competing priorities, giving everyone and everything partial attention rather than anyone or anything her complete focus. Saturday morning, Amanda decided to attend Emma's soccer game with a commitment to being fully present rather than using the time to catch up on emails. As she sat on the sidelines, actually watching her daughter play instead of multitasking, Amanda struck up a conversation with another parent, Lisa, whose calm presence and obvious enjoyment of the game created a striking contrast to Amanda's usual sideline anxiety. "Your daughter plays beautifully," Lisa commented during halftime. "And you seem so relaxed watching her." "I'm always stressed about managing everything during these games." Lisa smiled warmly. "I used to be exactly the same way. Actually, much worse. I was the parent answering business calls during kids' activities and checking emails during bedtime stories. It nearly cost me my relationship with my children and definitely damaged my effectiveness at work." "What changed?" Amanda asked, intrigued by Lisa's calm confidence. "I learned the difference between managing multiple priorities and fragmenting my attention across them." "Would you be interested in hearing about it?" Lisa explained that she was a mindful parenting coach who had discovered these principles through her own struggles with work-life integration. I spent years believing that being a good parent and a good professional meant doing both things simultaneously and perfectly. I was exhausted, my children felt disconnected from me, and ironically, my work performance suffered because I was constantly distracted by parenting worries. That sounds exactly like my current situation. How did you change it? I learned about presence-based living from a meditation teacher who specialized in working with busy parents. She taught me that quality of attention matters more than quantity of time, and that being fully present for shorter periods is more valuable than being partially present for longer periods. Amanda felt a spark of recognition. Can you give me an example of how that works practically? Sure. Instead of spending 3 hours helping with homework while also checking emails and planning tomorrow's meetings, I now spend 1 hour of completely focused homework time where my phone is off and my attention is entirely on my child. The homework gets done more efficiently, my child feels truly supported, and I'm then free to focus on work without distraction or guilt. But don't you miss important work communications? Initially, I worried about that too. But I discovered that most urgent communications can wait an hour for a thoughtful response. And when I do respond, I'm more focused and effective because I'm not trying to parent simultaneously. Lisa continued, the key insight was realizing that divided attention doesn't multiply effectiveness, it diminishes it. When I'm scattered across multiple priorities, I'm not really serving any of them well. How do you handle the pressure from both sides? Work demanding immediate responses and children needing attention. I learned to create what I call sacred containers, designated times for specific priorities where I'm completely present for that one thing. Work time is work time, kid time is kid time, and self-care time is self-care time. The boundaries actually make me more effective in each area. Amanda was fascinated by this approach. Doesn't that require saying no to some opportunities or requests? Absolutely. But I've found that doing fewer things with complete presence creates better results than doing many things with fragmented attention. My work quality improved dramatically when I stopped trying to be available 24/7. My children became more secure and independent when they could count on having my full attention during our designated times together. They talked through the rest of the game, with Lisa sharing specific strategies for implementing presence-based living. Amanda felt something shifting in her understanding of what integration really meant. Lisa, this sounds almost like meditation or spiritual practice. In many ways, it is. The principles come from mindfulness traditions that teach the value of single-pointed attention. When we're fully present for whatever we're doing, everything becomes more efficient and more meaningful. Can I ask how you handle the guilt about not being available to everyone all the time? That was the hardest part initially. But I realized that my guilt about not being constantly available was actually preventing me from being truly helpful to anyone. When I'm fully present for my children during our time together, they feel more secure and need less reassurance. When I'm completely focused during work hours, I accomplish more and can leave the office feeling satisfied rather than anxious about unfinished tasks. After the game, Lisa invited Amanda to a workshop she was hosting the following week on mindful integration for working parents. Amanda decided to attend, sensing that she needed a fundamentally different approach rather than just better time management tactics. Lisa's wisdom that afternoon introduced Amanda to several profound principles from Buddhist tradition that apply directly to modern life integration challenges. The core teaching was about single-pointed attention or samadhi, the practice of bringing complete focus to whatever task or relationship is present. This principle recognizes that scattered attention diminishes effectiveness in all areas, while focused attention enhances quality and efficiency simultaneously. The concept of sacred containers reflects the Buddhist understanding of mindful boundaries, creating intentional spaces for different aspects of life, rather than allowing them to blur together chaotically. This approach honors the unique requirements of each role, while preventing the exhaustion that comes from constant role switching. Lisa's emphasis on presence over productivity embodied the Buddhist principle of being rather than doing, finding fulfillment in the quality of engagement rather than the quantity of accomplishments. This shift allows parents and professionals to experience satisfaction and connection, even within busy lives. The teaching about letting go of constant availability reflects the Buddhist understanding of non-attachment, caring deeply about responsibilities, while not being controlled by the need to control every outcome immediately. This principle reduces anxiety while actually improving responsiveness to genuine priorities. The practice of mindful transitions between roles embodies the Buddhist concept of conscious living, moving through daily activities with awareness rather than automaticity. This approach transforms routine transitions into opportunities for presence and intention setting. The principle of enough became central to Amanda's new understanding. Buddhist teaching emphasizes contentment with sufficient rather than excessive, doing enough well rather than trying to do everything perfectly. This perspective reduces the perfectionist pressure that often undermines both professional and personal effectiveness. Most importantly, these teachings address the fundamental anxiety that drives much work-life imbalance. The fear that if we're not constantly available to everyone, we'll fail to meet important responsibilities. Buddhist wisdom suggests that true responsibility includes caring for our own capacity to serve others sustainably. Amanda's implementation of presence-based integration created remarkable improvements in both family relationships and professional performance within just 2 months. Her new approach began with what she called priority containers, specific times dedicated to single-focused attention on key areas. Morning routines became phone-free zones, devoted entirely to family connection. Work hours were protected from non-emergency personal interruptions. Evening homework time became sacred space, where her complete attention was available to whichever child needed support. The results were immediate and striking. Emma's anxiety decreased significantly when she could count on having Amanda's undivided attention during their designated times together. Jake's behavioral issues improved as he felt more secure about when and how he would receive his mother's focus. Both children became more independent during Amanda's work hours because they trusted that their needs would be fully met during family time. Amanda's professional effectiveness increased dramatically when she stopped trying to parent while working and work while parenting. Projects were completed more efficiently when she could focus without distraction. Client relationships improved because her responses, while not always immediate, were more thoughtful and strategic. Team dynamics shifted positively as well. Amanda's modeling of healthy boundaries encouraged her team members to establish their own work-life integration practices. Productivity increased across the department as people felt permission to focus deeply rather than constantly multitask. Most surprisingly, Amanda's stress levels decreased significantly, even though she was setting more boundaries rather than fewer. The constant low-level anxiety of partial attention to multiple priorities was replaced by the satisfaction of complete engagement with present tasks. 6 months after meeting Lisa, Amanda was promoted to Chief Marketing Officer. The promotion committee specifically cited her improved strategic thinking and team leadership as key factors. Amanda attributed these improvements to her increased capacity for focused attention and presence-based decision-making. Her personal life flourished as well. Emma's grades improved, and her teacher commented on her increased confidence and emotional stability. Jake's behavioral issues resolved as his need for attention was met consistently and completely. Amanda rediscovered joy in parenting when interactions weren't constantly interrupted by work preoccupations. Most importantly, Amanda found that presence-based living created space for the spontaneous moments that make life meaningful, unhurried conversations with her children, creative insights at work, and personal satisfaction that came from doing fewer things more fully, rather than many things partially. Tonight, as we complete our journey through these 7 stories, let Amanda's transformation invite you to consider your own relationship with attention and presence. Take a moment to reflect. In your daily life, how often do you give complete attention to whatever you're doing? Are there relationships or responsibilities that would benefit from your undivided focus rather than your divided availability? Consider Lisa's teaching about the difference between managing multiple priorities and fragmenting attention across them. What would change if you created sacred containers for your most important activities and relationships? Think about the concept of quality over quantity in both work and personal interactions. Where might you benefit from being more fully present for shorter periods rather than partially present for longer periods? Amanda discovered that presence-based living isn't about doing less, but about being more fully engaged with whatever you're doing. When she stopped trying to do everything simultaneously, she found that everything improved: work quality, family relationships, and personal well-being. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider the wisdom of mindful integration that Amanda learned, how success comes not from perfect multitasking but from bringing your whole self to each moment and each role. Let her story remind you that the secret to having it all isn't doing everything at once, but being completely present for whatever you're doing. True integration comes not from managing multiple priorities simultaneously, but from moving between them with complete presence and conscious intention. As our journey through these 7 stories comes to an end, carry with you the understanding that each story holds, that the wisdom you seek isn't waiting somewhere else, but is available in this moment, in the gentle awareness that has been listening all along. Tonight, we've traveled together through 7 remarkable journeys across America, and in each one, you've discovered something that wise people have known for thousands of years. The solutions to our deepest struggles are often much simpler than we imagine, and the peace we seek isn't waiting somewhere else. It's available right here, right now, in the gentle awareness that recognizes its own inherent completeness. Let's take a moment to gather the threads of wisdom we've woven together tonight. In Portland, David learned that true productivity isn't about endless motion, but about meaningful progress guided by the question, what would love do? His story reminds us that sustainable success flows naturally when our actions align with our deepest values rather than external pressures. In Boston, Michael discovered the power of single-pointed attention, learning that excellence comes not from doing everything at once, but from bringing complete presence to whatever we're doing. His transformation from scattered multitasking to focused mastery shows us that the quality of our attention determines the quality of our results. In the Colorado mountains, Elena found the middle way of sustainable scaling, understanding that the strongest foundations support the greatest heights when we grow with wisdom rather than speed. Her story teaches us that sometimes slowing down is the fastest way to reach our destination. On the Nebraska plains, Thomas evolved from controlling leader to patient guide, learning to dance with circumstances rather than fight them. His journey reveals that true leadership comes not from having all the answers, but from creating conditions where wisdom can emerge from collective experience. In Chicago's financial district, Rachel discovered that equanimity in the face of uncertainty is more valuable than the illusion of control. Her story shows us that we can navigate life's inevitable ups and downs with greater skill when we stop fighting unpredictability and start working with it wisely. In Austin's creative community, Maya learned that breakthrough innovations come not from forcing inspiration, but from creating spacious conditions where insight can naturally emerge. Her experience reminds us that creativity flows most freely when we provide room for possibilities rather than desperate pressure for results. And in Denver's quiet suburbs, Amanda mastered the art of presence-based living, discovering that the secret to having it all isn't doing everything simultaneously, but being completely present for whatever we're doing in each moment. Each of these insights is immediately available to you, not as concepts to remember, but as ways of being to embody. David's question, "What would love do?" can guide any decision you face. Michael's practice of single-pointed attention can transform any task from obligation to opportunity. Elena's commitment to sustainable growth can inform any goal you're pursuing. Thomas's patient leadership can enhance any relationship where you have influence. Rachel's equanimity can bring peace to any situation involving uncertainty, which is to say, most situations. Maya's approach to creativity can unlock innovation in any area of your life. And Amanda's presence-based integration can bring harmony to any combination of responsibilities you're managing. But here's what makes these stories different from typical advice or strategies. They're not asking you to add more to your already full life. Instead, they're inviting you to discover what's already present when you approach familiar situations with fresh awareness. The wisdom of these stories isn't separate from your daily experience. It is your daily experience, seen with clearer eyes. The peace you've touched tonight isn't a temporary escape from reality. It is reality at its deepest level, always available, always here, waiting to be recognized. Tomorrow, when you return to your responsibilities and challenges, you'll carry something new, the quiet, knowing that no matter how demanding your day becomes, there is always a place of stillness within you, a place where your heart can rest. The strategies may help you work more effectively, but the deeper gift is remembering who you are beneath all the doing. Notice how even now, without trying to do anything special, you're naturally settling into rest. Your breath has slowed, your body has released the day's tension, your mind has found the space between thoughts. This is your true nature, peaceful, aware, complete, just as you are. The ancient wisdom woven through tonight's stories points to this simple truth. You already have everything you need. Not everything you want, perhaps, but everything needed for this moment. And this moment is where life actually happens, where peace is actually found, where wisdom actually emerges. Each story tonight has been a reminder that transformation doesn't require dramatic changes or perfect circumstances. It happens through small shifts in awareness, gentle adjustments in approach, and the willingness to meet each moment with presence rather than pressure. David found freedom by asking one simple question. Michael discovered focus by practicing one thing at a time. Elena created sustainability by honoring natural rhythms. Thomas developed leadership by learning to dance with change. Rachel found peace by accepting uncertainty. Maya unlocked creativity by creating space for insight. Amanda mastered integration by being present for whatever she was doing. These aren't superhuman achievements. They're natural expressions of wisdom that emerges when we stop fighting life and start flowing with it. As you drift into the deep, restorative sleep that high-quality living requires, carry with you this understanding. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. The rest you find tonight becomes the foundation for tomorrow's conscious action. The peace you touch in sleep becomes the source of tomorrow's wise responses. The stories you've heard tonight will continue working even as you sleep. Your subconscious mind will integrate these insights, weave them into your understanding, and prepare you to recognize opportunities to apply them in your own unique circumstances. You don't need to remember every detail or force any particular outcome. Simply trust that seeds of wisdom planted tonight will grow in their own time and way. Sweet dreams, and may your rest tonight be the foundation for a tomorrow filled with presence, purpose, and the quiet joy that comes from living in alignment with your deepest wisdom. Until we meet again in this place where hearts find rest, may you carry with you the peace that has been listening to these words all along, the peace that you are, the peace that you've always been, the peace that no external circumstance can ever truly disturb. Rest well, knowing that you have given yourself a profound gift tonight. And may your dreams be filled with the gentle wisdom of lives well lived and hearts well rested.